Okay, disorders in red blood cells. So here's 3. So anemia is when you don't have enough red blood cells, or maybe you don't have enough iron, you can't make enough hemoglobin, you don't have enough hemoglobin. So lots of times it makes you really tired. They feel run down, don't know, they don't know what's happening. So they'll check this, and sometimes they'll give you iron. Another disorder is sickle cell anemia. So sickle cell is a genetically inherited disease, and what it does, instead of the red blood cells being nice and round, bagel shaped, they are sickle shaped. So they're shaped like half moons, or like a quarter moon or an eighth moon, and the sickles then will get trapped in the little blood vessels in the capillaries, and it causes a lot of pain. They rupture. It can be really bad. Hemolytic disease of the newborn. This is a disorder that the blood cells can burst in a baby before they're born and maybe after they're born. So we're going to talk about that when we talk about Rh factors and the hemolytic disease of the newborn. So hemolytic means lyse or break apart. So hemolytic means we're breaking apart the baby's blood cells. Not good. Okay, now white blood cells. So white blood cells, we don't have as many as we do red. So red is the most. White blood cells, we only have between like 5 to 10,000 per drop of blood. Okay, they still come from the red bone marrow. They have a nucleus, so that's different. Okay, their production is controlled by this factor called colony stimulating factor, which is CSF. Okay, so instead of EPO, they're controlled by this thing called CSF. Okay, now white blood cells, they're in your blood, but they can also move out of your blood and be in your tissue. So their function, I have this underlined, so this is what's important, is to fight infection. Okay, so they're a really, really important part of your immune system. Okay, and there's a whole bunch of different kinds. Okay, so some live for days, so they don't live very long, but others can survive months or years. So they're really different from reds. Okay, so there's 2 big ways that we organize white blood cells. Okay, so there are granular blood cells. Okay, and if you made a microscope slide of them and you stained it with this purple stain that we use, it's called Wright stain. If you stained it and you looked at it with the microscope, you're going to see that the cells are real grainy looking. It looks like there's stuff in there. Okay, and their nucleus is lobed. The nucleus isn't a nice round nucleus like we learned about before. Okay, now there's 3 types of these. Okay, so eosinophils, basophils, and neutrophils. I have a little cheaty way to remember that these are granulocytes. So I just say Ben, so B-E-N. So Ben and Phil love their granny. Okay. Okay, now agranulocytes, guess what? Agranulocytes. So they don't have any granules. Their nucleus is rounder. It's not lobed. Okay, and they are the 2 types of agranulocytes are lymphocytes and monocytes. Okay, so now we're going to go through, I have a slide for each one of these, so we'll talk about them in order. Okay, so neutrophils, they're the most abundant, so we have the greatest number of neutrophils. So there's all the white blood cells, most of them are neutrophils. Okay, so they have a multi-lobe nucleus. Their job, if you're infected with something, they come out of the blood and they go into the tissue and they go through phagocytosis. Okay, so they engulf the pathogen and destroy it. Okay, so they're going to destroy the pathogen when it first comes in. Okay, now eosinophils, there's not so many of them. Okay, their nucleus, if you had to look at it, it's got 2 lobes. Okay, they have lots of granules. What I really am more concerned about that you guys know is that their numbers go up if you have a parasite, and they also go up if you're having an allergic reaction to something. Okay, now basophils, okay, there's not many basophils at all. Okay, their nucleus is U-shaped. They actually look dark, really dark in a slide. They release histamine. Okay, so histamine is a chemical that's going to make your capillaries leaky. So histamine is going to make your nose run, your eyes water, your head get stuffed up. Okay, so it's being produced by your basophils. Okay, lymphocytes. Lymphocytes are really small cells. They have a big nucleus. They turn into cells that are called B cells and T cells. B cells make antibodies, and T cells, they run your immune system. So they're almost like the general and the infantry of your army. Okay, so T cells, HIV actually infects T cells. Okay, now monocytes. There's not too many monocytes. Okay, they're really, really big. Monocytes develop into macrophages. Okay, so when monocytes are in the blood, we call them monocytes. If they migrate from the blood into the tissue, they're called macrophages. So a macrophage is going to engulf pathogens. Okay, so we have them in our lungs, we have them in our brain, we have them in our kidney or our liver. They're all over the place. Okay, now disorders that involve white blood cells. Okay, so the first one we have is called severe combined immunodeficiency disease, or SCID. So this is, I don't know if any of you remember the Boy in the Bubble movie. Okay, so the Boy in the Bubble. This is that was like John Travolta when I was a little girl. Okay, so it's an inherited disease, and the stem cells that produce the white blood cells are missing an enzyme, so they can't fight any infection. So pretty much they don't have an immune system, so they could get anything that's around and it could kill them because they can't fight it. Okay, leukemia, that's cancer of the white blood cells. Okay, so the cells, you end up with too many white blood cells, and by that number being high, the red blood cells can't do what they're supposed to do, and the white blood cells can't do what they're supposed to do. So leukemia is cancer of the white blood cells. Okay, now the last one is infectious mononucleosis. So mono, okay, so they always call it the kissing disease. Okay, so this occurs when this virus, Epstein-Barr virus, EBV, gets into the lymphocytes, and the symptoms of mono: fatigue, sore throat, swollen lymph nodes. Okay, you end up with a lot of monocytes in your blood. Okay, so now whenever they do like a CBC, which a complete blood panel or complete blood count, what they're doing is they're looking at your formed elements. So they're going to look to see how many reds you have, how many whites you have, and they'll look at this, the differential number. So they'll look at how many eosinophils you have, how many basophils, how many neutrophils, how many lymphocytes, how many monocytes. Okay, now how much time do we have? Oh, so that's 8 minutes. Okay, let's stop here, and then we'll have platelets by itself.